It's time to whip it. Why are you saying that? Time to whip it real good. Why are you being so dramatic?
I don't know. I'm making this up as I go.
Ladies, gentlemen, and tarnished of all ages, have you ever in your entire playtime with Elden Ring picked up a whip, equipped it, and used it? I bet the majority of you have said no. And of those of you who did try it, how many of you decided to keep it around as a consistent part of your toolkit? The number of you relating to this concept is dwindling incredibly quickly because, well, for the most part, people just don't respect whips in Elden Ring. And they're Elden wrong. People underestimate the whip. Its attack power is lower than most any other melee weapon category, at least at a base level. But what it sacrifices in damage per hit, it gains in both significant range advantage and also speed of attacks. In PvP, if you use whips, you are a nearly oppressive force. The stagger value is surprisingly high, so if people try to trade with you, it doesn't really work most often, as long as you properly use your range advantage against them. As well, when you power stance them, the hits come out slightly off time of each other for the most part, meaning even if people are roll spamming, it is tough to avoid every hit in a combo if they are within your radius of range. You can, if you want, also just use a whip as an offhand weapon as a backup for your other weapons, for the concept of a quick ranged addition to your two-handed weapon melee build, for example. Two-hand normally, then drop off to use the whip at long range in one hand, which is especially effective for finishing off low-health targets that don't expect you to have it. In PvE, they are still good for the same reasons. Never underestimate the power of having a long-range quick attack as a separate option in your playstyle. Numbers are not everything when defining if something is effective or not, because whips give you a certain sort of comfort that many other things in the game cannot accomplish. And while using the base standard whip you can find in Castle Morn near the start of the game is exceedingly underwhelming, if you start building around whips, especially some of these stronger later game whips, then you can really start to experience how underrated whips are as a weapon. I very rarely see people using them, and yet honestly, my experience playing with them the last few days is some of the most enjoyable time that I've spent in Elden Ring so far. Genuinely. I don't know if it just gels with me on a personal level or what, but the satisfaction of power stancing whips is very high, especially some of the more unique whips that the game has to offer. Sure, there is the standard whip that I mentioned before, but there's also the Urumi, a whip sword, which straightens to a cutting edge at the end of your strikes, looking absolutely badass. This thing is just so damn cool. As well, it is one of the only weapons in the game that goes up to S scaling with dexterity when you set it to keen affinity, which is a neat little bonus. And then also there is the Hoslow pedal whip, which you can get from the Volcano Manor questline, which is a beautiful metallic thorny whip essentially made of barbed wire. These ones are really strong if you build them up towards bleeds, which isn't too surprising as bleed is strong in general, but the point that I am making is that you can use whips to take advantage of some of what are already some of the more powerful and prevalent build concepts out there that are just used by users of other weapons. Past this, there is also the Thorned Whip, which is used by the Firelate that's just before this really thin bridge in the mountaintop of the Giants beside the Zamora ruins. He has a small chance to drop it upon defeat. Statistically, this one is sort of difficult to recommend as it performs very similarly to the Hoslow whip, which is easier to acquire. If you like it visually though, as it is quite cool, then of course that's a good reason right there, but for the most part, if you are using it, it's just a bit of a downgrade. The scaling is very slightly better than the Hoslow whip, but the base damage is lower by quite a significant amount, and the difference at 80 of the scaling stat is not enough to make the better scaling Thorned Whip do more damage per hit. As well, it has lower bleed status than the Hoslow whip does as well, so it really is sort of just an aesthetic choice to do a grind for a 4% weapon drop here. As well, the Magma whip Candlestick, which is just freaking awesome, being a whip made of, well, magma, and the weapon skill is very cool too. This one you get from Patches in his questline, and if you build it around fire damage and weapon skill damage, you can absolutely do some fun stuff with it. After all, Magma will melt most AI enemies who aren't smart enough to walk out of it. And then the final whip in Elden Ring is a remembrance weapon, the Giant's Red Braid Fire Whip, literally a lock of braided hair containing firepower. How pyromantic. These ones, when power stance, can do some pretty good damage these days, especially as a lot of stuff is weak to fire. And the weapon skill is pretty great too, swinging the whip around at a long range, dealing a fairly large amount of damage very quickly. And with the somewhat recent patch 1.04, this weapon skill actually gained a roll window too, so you can use it much more comfortably and safely now, making it actually applicable as something that you can play around with as a main weapon. Long story short, no matter how you use them, use whips! Use whips! They cost 3 weight at the absolute highest. The biggest one costs 3 weight, and I bet none of you have all of your weapon slots full either. Make use of variety, make use of options of a varied toolkit. Personally, I am more than happy to main the whips, to power stance them as my main offensive force, and I think other people should try it too. But even if you don't want to commit to them in any way like that, it would cost you extremely little to just have a whip as a secondary or tertiary weapon in your inventory to just, well, whip out in the right situation. In PvE, this can be any moment that you are at a longer range than your other melee weapons allow due to a mechanic that's happening or something like that, or certain smaller enemies if you want to stagger lock them and then hit them with the big weapon. And in PvP, do not underestimate the power of the surprise whip. Whenever you get someone low health, if they don't know you have that whip, just quick swap and slap. No problem, they won't be ready. But use them, because whips are awesome. Whips are fun, and whips are way better than I ever hear anyone give them credit for. That's it, that's all. I just wanted to get this off my chest. Ever since I started playing, I have heard people say that whips are bad, don't use whips, don't bother, all that kind of stuff. And it put me off of trying them in the first place, and now that I have, I absolutely love them. So I guess take that principle into heart, if nothing else from the video. Just because someone tells you that a certain weapon or playstyle is bad, doesn't mean that you won't personally enjoy the hell out of it. So do whatever your heart desires, both in Elden Ring and in life, okay? I've been Cotton Dinosaur from RageGamingVideos, and this has been a talk about whips. Like if you like the video, subscribe and hit the notification bell for more, and most importantly, ladies and gentlemen, until next time, stay sweet.
Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world a stage. Goodbye.